Hi, I want to talk to you about anatomical position today. So a couple of things we're gonna go through about three ideas: anatomical position itself, and then we're going to discuss the planes and how the planes divide our body into different hemispheres, and then we're going to talk about movements our joints do. So first of all, let's start with the anatomical position. I'm going to start with the position itself, then I'm going to describe why it's important. So first off, your feet are about hip-width apart, toes facing forward, not facing out, toes facing forward. Your hands are down at your sides, palms facing forward. Your gaze is straight ahead. This is the anatomical position. Let's take a look at it from the side. Again, anatomical position. So a few reasons why, as personal trainers, it's important is one, it's the point when our muscles have the least amount of tension put on them. So that's important because before we load the muscles with whatever exercise we're asking our clients to do, we need to know the starting point of our muscles when they have the least amount of tension to understand exactly how we're manipulating our clients' bodies, essentially. And so it just puts everything in alignment. So that's the main reason why it's really important for us to know. Muscles are its most least amount of tension. So now I want to discuss the different planes of the body and how it divides the body in different hemispheres. The first plane I want to talk about is the frontal plane. So the frontal plane divides our body basically as I break anatomical position with my head. Divides the body into the front and the back, or anterior and posterior. So it runs right down the middle and splits everything in half, from front to back. The next plane I want to talk about is the sagittal plane. So that's the plane that divides the body into left and right. So it comes right down the middle, through your nose, through your chest, aligns with your spine and your navel, right into the ground. So again, that divides the body to left, and right. And now, the sagittal plane, or medial plane. And now, the transverse plane. So that divides the body and divides the head from the feet, or superior and inferior. Essentially, it's at your belly button, it's parallel to the floor, and it divides this way. So again, head to feet, superior, inferior. Those are the planes, basic planes of the body. So now why all that is important, anatomical position, is because our muscles act on our joints to either break anatomical position to come away from the planes or go back to those planes. So I'll describe flexion and extension first. So we'll start with the most obvious one. Well, not the most obvious, but we'll start with one of the most basic ones, which is flexion and flexion of the elbow. So again, anatomical position, and when the elbow flexes, it comes away from anatomical position towards the anterior plane of the body, away from that frontal plane, but towards the anterior body, the front of the body. Extension moves the forearm. The motion at the elbow is straightening the arm back to anatomical position, back towards that frontal plane. Let's take a look at it from the side. Flexion, extension. Now our wrists also flex and extend. Flex and extend. Back to anatomical position is always our point of reference. Our shoulders also flex away from anatomical position and extend, return to anatomical position. So does our trunk or our waist flex? This is actually hip flexion, if you notice, and extend. hip flexion, extend. So now our knees, all of the flexion to this point has been towards the interior of the body. Our knees actually flex towards the posterior and then extend towards the anterior. Flex and extend. It's a little bit of a twist into the idea of extension and flexion. So now I want to talk about abduction and adduction. And that's in reference point, anatomical position. But that's moving away from that sagittal plane, medial plane, or the midline that divides the body into right and left hemispheres. So our shoulders, abduct, abduction, and adduct, adding to the midline. Abduction away from the midline, adduct to the midline. The hips also, abduct and adduct. So now I want to talk about rotation, and internal and external rotation. So let's take a look at the shoulder. So, lateral rotation, or external rotation, is away from that midline. I'm going to break anatomical position with the elbow, flex it, so it be a little more obvious. So, external rotation, or lateral rotation, medial or internal rotation back to the midline. External, internal. Our hips also rotate. Okay. External, but if you look at what's actually rotating, that is the femur. External rotation, internal rotation, towards midline. Away from midline, towards midline. Hips, internal and externally rotating. So now that I've talked about flexion, extension, abduction, abduction, internal and external rotation, I want to talk about circumduction, which is what the ball and socket joints do. So that's the shoulder and the hip joints. And that incorporates all of them. So incorporate flexion in a big circular motion. Flexion, rotate external, internal rotation, flexion, external rotation, internal rotation. And also extension, extend back. So extension, external, and then internal rotation back. Our hips also circumduct. And now our feet do inversion and eversion. So inversion is when we bring the sole of our feet into the midline. Eversion is bringing the sole of feet away from the midline. Inversion, eversion. So the last motions that I want to talk about is supination and pronation, and that has to do with your hands. So if you notice, facing forward. Now when we lay down on our back, we are in a supine position. So I want to flex my elbow to make this more clear. So right now, my hand is in a supine position, palms facing up. When we rotate the ulnar and the radius over, that's prone. So the palm of your hand is like the front of your body. Supine, imagine that you're lying down on your back. If you're lying down on your stomach, prone. That's the motion, not at the elbow, but right about here, that the ulnar and the radius do, over top of one another. And so that is what I wanted to cover today. Just give a basic idea. And again, anatomical position, but everything we ask our clients to do is from this position. The bicep curl, shoulder press, squat. It's all from this position. It's all the joints. If we want to understand what the muscles are doing and what their function is, we need to understand it from this point. For example, and I'll close on this point, we have really tight hip flexors. That's going to hinder the posterior chain, the gluteus maximus and minimus, and the hamstrings. Really tight hip flexors will create this anterior tilt, and it's going to hinder the power and explosion of what that whole posterior chain can do, bringing your body back, bringing your legs back, and extending your leg, your hip, back to anatomical position. So that's what those muscles do, brings it back. As an example. Thank you very much.